All right, thank you. Okay.
So, at any rate, so I didn't know precisely what kind of demographics I would have sitting here, and so I imagine some of you are experienced fractional CFOs, some of you are early fractional CFOs, some of you are just curious about it or wanting to get into it. So I just figured I'd talk a little bit about where I've been and where I think the fractional CFO market is today and where I think it's going. And so hopefully that'll be of some interest to everybody. And I actually prepared Mark, since you're running the slides, I prepared the last slide. I've created a series of questions that I've been asked most frequently. That's if everyone's really quiet and doesn't have any questions, but feel free to not, we might run out of time before we get to that slide as well. So, because people can feel free to jump in, raise your hand as we go along if you've got a question throughout. So, at any rate, I'll start off with if you can go to the next slide. So, I can't see the slides. I need to get a different view so I know what slide you're on.
Mark, I actually can't see him either.
Yeah, slides need to be turned on.
A technical difficulty? Or do you want me to share? Oh, there
There
you
we
go.
go.
All right. Go back one. All right. Some of you have seen my LinkedIn profile, and right at the top of my LinkedIn profile, I put my mission statement to grow the number of fractional CFOs from 5,000 to 50,000 in the next 5 years. And that usually begs the question of, how do you know there's 5,000 now? And how are we going to know that there's 50,000 in 5 years? Followed by that's a 10x thing. That's a kind of a social media thing, 10xing things. But I did 5,000 to 50,000. How do I know that? I don't know that. I think I really put that there just to kind of display the magnitude of what I thought the growth needed to be of having fractional CFOs in the marketplace. I've seen a couple people post on LinkedIn. They tried to use LinkedIn Premium to figure out how many practicing fractional CFOs there were. Someone came up with 7,500. I just started with 5,000 and figured, well, we just want to 10x the number of fractional CFOs in the marketplace. And that's kind of my mission statement. It started, Brad mentioned that I wrote a book. When I wrote the book, I was planning on writing a book about how to be a fractional CFO. And my coach of the book writing cohort that I was part of, he was brainstorming it with me, and he said, if you sell a how-to book, you're going to only sell a fraction of what you could be selling. He said, why don't you pick something that you think will interest a lot more people in your demographic? And I said, well, that's interesting because this was in 2022. I've been now a fractional CFO for 16 years, and I've probably talked with 100 people that my referral sources have sent me. They send me a customer referral or a prospect referral, but they also send me people like, hey, this client of ours, they just sold, and the CFO is looking for something, and we were talking about, this fractional CFO thing. I wonder if you could get together with him or her and talk about what it's like to be a fractional CFO. So 100 people later, the light bulb went off, and I decided to write a book to CFOs who wanted to be a fractional CFO, kind of just to peel back the curtain and give them an idea of what it was like. My selfish motive was I didn't want to go into a long 2-hour discussion of kind of laying the foundation of what a fractional CFO was. I wanted to have a book so I could tell people to here, read my book first, and then we'll get together and talk. So that's kind of this second part, really the subplot of the 5 to 50,000 on the mission statement is that there is enough growth opportunity, in my opinion, to handle that many more fractional CFOs. I did some research in my book, and I should have had this memorized, but I don't. But somewhere like 1% of I think I looked up 150 to 500 employees. How many people had a CFO? How many companies had a CFO? And approximately 1.5% had either a full-time or a part-time CFO currently. That's 50 to 500 employees in the and that's just in the United States. So if we could just, triple the percentage, to 3 or 5%, that's a whole lot of fractional CFOs that businesses frankly need. But I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir there. Next slide. So 2006, as a preamble to this slide, I lost my job. I was a CFO for a company. We were about a $50 million company. And I spent about a year, my last year there, helping the owner sell the company. So that was one of those interesting scenarios where he didn't want anyone in the company to know what was going on. And so the burden fell on me. In addition to being a CFO, I was I guess, administrator of everything, all the companies that wanted to kick the tires and whatever. So at the end of 2006, actually September of 2006, the CEO they brought in to run this company, he decided he wanted his own CFO. So I went off into the unknown. Back then, I don't know if they still have these, but they actually were a little bit generous, gave me an executive placement package. So I got to work with executive placement guys who back then, for me, were pretty worthless. But along the way, though, within a month, I had my first fractional client. I called it a part-time client back then, but I had one, and then so September I left the company I was with. October I had just one small part-time client. January I had my second one. By February I was full. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. Back then I filled up really quickly. I think it was luck. And a little bit of emailing around and working my network. To this day, I have yet to get a client in 18 years directly by approaching a client. They've all been through referrals from somebody. But at any rate, back in 2006, here I am trying to figure out, well, I'm going to do this part-time gig just while I'm looking for a full-time job, even after the second one. But I'd heard about this part-time CFO thing, and I thought, well, I'll see what's out there on the internet. Well, back then there wasn't much. I found this out at the time. I was able to see B2B CFO on the internet. They were active. They were early and active in promoting themselves. So in 2006, I did see them. It just wasn't a direction I wanted to go in at the time, because I wasn't even sure I wanted to be a fractional CFO. Tatum CFO, who I was honored to be able to meet Doug Tatum as I was writing my book, and he's got some fascinating stories about he started his business in 1993, and to this day, it's a fantastic model because he only placed their CFOs in PE groups and portfolio companies of PE groups at the time, and it was just a booming time for him to be able to place CFOs there to the point where he made a lot of money selling out to basically a staffing company. Advanced CFO Solutions, 1996. Now known as Amplio. They were early. also. This was almost like the Wild West before 2000. In fact, it kind of was when I had, got to throw a plug in for Focus CFO, early adopt. It was kind of like the Wild West, I'm sure, up in Columbus, Ohio. I was 5 years after that, but I didn't run across Brad at the time, and things might have been totally different. But anyway, if you can go on to the next slide, that's just a little history lesson. Here's what the internet was like back then. Interestingly, LinkedIn, when I started, only had 1.6 million worldwide members. I don't think I even found out about it that early. It took me a few years to even hear about it. And so that was not an impact. Interestingly, I thought it was interesting that Mozilla Firefox was actually the #1 browser at the time. And that kind of surprised me. But bottom line is, there was not as much stuff you could find on the internet in terms of research that you can find now. I was just on my own. I was shall we say, winging it. And so, and I couldn't even really publicize. I didn't want to go out and spend my money on a website that I didn't even know. People know how search engine optimization works now, but it was really expensive, really complicated back then to launch a website. So next slide, please. So just in summary, lost my job in 2006. 2007, I told my huge network of 53 people on my first email announcing that I was leaving my prior company and that I was looking for a full-time job. And that was in 2006 when I lost my job. In 2007, my network was up to 112. And I told them, by the way, stop looking for a full-time job for me, because I'm now doing this part-time thing for good, I think. So as soon as I sent out that email, that was my first anniversary, September of 2007. I lost a couple clients and I was down to one client, $1,500 a month. And that was kind of a trying time, because I had two kids in private school. They were like 10 and 11 at the time. And so and my wife wasn't working. So, but in February of 2008, I picked up two more clients. I was full and I never looked back. So it was a little bit of a blip on the radar, but, even back then, not everyone, but most people know about fractional CFOs. Back then, I had to spend my first 20 minutes of a meeting explaining to people what is a fractional CFO. Actually, we called them part-time CFOs back then. But nowadays, most people have heard of us. They may not know what we really are, but they've heard the term. Some haven't, but I think more than 50% of people I run into have heard of what I'm doing. So next one. So back then, we were known as part-time, not fractional CFOs, but I started noticing fractional coming in around 2010. I don't know, maybe Brad noticed it before or after. It picked up steam a little bit just because there were so many variations of other than the part-time CFO. But back then, we were what a lot of the firms are now. We were literally part-time CFOs. We had the full job description. And we would go on site a day a week, a day a month, 2 days a month. And remember, that was the work from home was not so prevalent back then. It's hard to believe that's only 14 years ago. But that's what we did. And firms like Focus CFO, like my firm, Next Gen CFO, we started with 4 partners in 2010 and started growing slowly. The early firms started to grow more regionally. I think you had Focus up in the Ohio area. You had an outfit called Charles River up in the Massachusetts area. Seton Hill down in Texas. And our next gen CFO group we had was just in the middle of North Carolina, and we called the Triad, and we just grew one here and one there to where we're 19 now, and we've actually got about 4 or 5 alumni that have since retired. But that was then. And if you can go on to the next slide. So this is today, because I think the COVID era was an inflection point for fractional CFOs. I don't know. I've got a lot, feel free to shoot holes in my argument on this, but because I've got a lot of you guys are fractionals also. But this was an interesting statistic I saw that December 2019, Zoom had 10 million users. 2020, April, 4 months later, they had 300 million users, which is crazy. And that whole era sent us home from a lot of our clients. It really enabled a lot of remote workers, and it allowed people to just kind of think about what would it be like to just work from home all the time. And I really didn't hear about virtual CFO as a term prior to the COVID era. And maybe it was out there, but it was not very well known. But after that, there are so many people that are CFOs that are considered virtual CFOs. They're marketing around the country, around the world, and the internet enables that. So, and then the last thing, the last point on this slide, although the majority of fractional CFOs, because we had the biggest start, are doing the part-time, because I do that too, and I think Focus CFO does the same thing. We are part-time, full service. We have the full job description of a CFO when we go on site. We've got the most people in there because we started first and we established a base, and we're still growing. But the biggest growth today is coming from people that are, virtual, so a lot of people who are non-CFOs, and a lot of firms that sell what they call CFO services. And you see these all over LinkedIn. I'm kind of in the business a little bit because I'm marketing, coaching, and also promoting my book. So I look at people's websites when they or LinkedIn sites and see that there are a bunch of people out there that call themselves fractional CFOs that have never been a CFO and that have never been a controller even. And yet they're calling it, they're selling a piece of what a CFO would do, but they're not, but they're calling themselves fractional CFOs. So that's a little bit of every once in a while, a controversy will flare up on LinkedIn, and some people will comment back and forth, but I think they're in a legitimate space in the in the market. So I've given you all a lot, so I really would welcome a question at this point or two. So does anyone have any questions?
Afternoon, this is Bill. Yeah.
Bill? Oh, I see Bill took his thing off. No, or Eric? Eric, do you have a question?
I've not heard anything.
Or is that just posting your
What
thing?
did it say?
Sorry, I'm seeing names on the chat.
Tom Vogel has his hand up, Tom,
Okay, sorry.
or Scott Vogel.
Okay,
I've
Scott.
not heard
Oh, there we
the
go.
last-
All right.
Hey, Mark,
I
can you
had
mute
a
Bill
text
Lee?
from BJ a couple months ago.
Can you mute him? There you go.
So I wanted to know how you establish a model on how much to charge people.
That's a that's a loaded question.
Of course it is.
Yeah. How do I establish a model? Really, there's to me, it's what the market will bear. So I'm going to charge as much as the market will bear. And so I'm now part of a group of 19 people. We are out there talking to prospects and clients every day, all the time. So we know what the market bears. So the worst thing to do is to underprice your service and then find out that someone down the street's getting a lot more money for your time, for their time. So I'm in the, kind of the local area hybrid. I'm not really the virtual around the country kind of scenario. So it's easier for us to figure out what a market-based price is. But that's I do it by trial and error, frankly. And over the years and over the contacts with customers, if you get a customer and they're paying a certain amount, I have found now in terms of specific dollars, because I talk to a lot of fractional CFOs all over the country. With the numbers
I'm also on a Zoom.
the numbers I've heard.
It's okay.
Yeah. Can you mute? Okay. The numbers I've heard, I'm charging down in North Carolina. I can get $7,500 a month for 1 day per week. So that's in not a high wealth area. I imagine if I was in a little smaller town or smaller area, I'd get less. People in New York, I've heard charging $10,000 and $11,000 a month for a day a week. And that's just a reference point, 1 day per week. You kind of scale down from there. It's like I start with what I'm providing in terms of hours. So I want to make at least that amount of what my time is. But then I also look at what is the value I'm providing. So I might come up with I'm there 4 hours a week. I'm there half a day a week. So I might take my daily rate and cut it in half and then mark it up a little bit. Just because I think I'm going to give them 4 hours of value that's worth a lot. I also, we have some people that price with a model of if you raise money for your client, and it's something that they were getting ready or wanting to hire an investment banker or a capital consultant for, we can go in and say, they would charge 2 to 3% fee to raise debt capital, and we could go in and charge 1% to do the same thing. So there's a gray area there, fine line in terms of there's a straddle whether that should be included in part of your fee. Should that be part of your fee? And so it's been pretty rare for me that I've actually charged a client for a fee for finding money, but I've talked to a number of fractional CFOs that have charged. So I don't know if that answered your question. I saw great, there's a book, yeah, on the chat. Now you're on mute. Scott, you're on mute.
And my screen disappeared because I got a call come through and I don't know how to get it back, but I hear you. Yeah, I was working as a fractional CFO at like a daily rate, but being retired, I didn't mind if it went over, and I wound up working extra days. It kept me busy and engaged.
Any other questions, or are we ready to go on? I can't see everyone.
Anybody else? Just speak up.
Cycling through. All right, so I guess next screen. All right, I kind of, this is not scientific. This is just my humble opinion, and I think it's been ever changing. But I divided up the fractional CFO business models into 6 different categories. I've thrown this out on LinkedIn, and I had a couple people disagree with me, but most people kind of agree. So this is what I'm working with right now. And so you'll find fractional CFOs operating in all of these different business models. And I think they're all servicing clients well, not talking about people specifically, but there's a business model that fits a certain type of business well. The first one, business model is the old, part-time CFO that we started with, that most of the business industry started with. I think Focus CFO would probably consider themselves that. I certainly do in my firm. We've got the full CFO job description. Interim CFO is, and there's a bunch of people out there doing this. They'll go into a company where there's been a CFO turnover, and there's a gap of time before you can bring in the next CFO, and while the recruiters are working, and that interim CFO will be there maybe 3 to 6 months. That tends to be, not always, but it tends to be people who are retired or semi-retired, because a lot of people are looking to make a full-time living when they're younger, and this might be 3 months on, 6 months off, or something like that. And if you're retired, that works fine with that income. But that being said, there's also an increase in the number of portfolio companies or PE groups that are looking for a CFO. They just bought a company, moved it into their portfolio, and they think that the CFO, who was the original bookkeeper of the company and kind of grew as the company grew, and has a CFO title, but really not the capabilities. A lot of portfolio companies jettison their CFOs. The PE groups take them and move them out. And while they're looking for a permanent part-time, they'll look for a interim CFO to come in and kind of handle that level. The third one I call a niche CFO. Actually, 30 years ago, I called it niche. But my understanding is now the inflection point is crossed and more people are calling it niche than niche. So that can be a couple of different ways of looking at that. One can be industry. So there are a handful of people I've run across who are CFOs to law firms, and that's all they do is law firms. There are CFOs, fractional CFOs to contractors. It might be the building trades, or might be a general contractor. There are fractional CFOs to, manufacturing, distribution. I mean, there's pretty much all CPMG, all kinds of, or CPG, rather, all kinds of different niches for industries. But I would also say that there's some niches for things that you do. So when I talked about having the full job description as a part-time CFO, some CFOs just focus on a segment of the job description. So I've got this one person I talked to up in New York. He's got a great Rolodex of people to raise equity capital from. And he uses that with company. People come to him and say, yeah, I want to, raise Series A financing, Series B, whatever. I want to do some angel get some angel investment money in. And they'll come to him and he will say, okay, I'll do that. But part of my business model is I am going to be your part-time CFO for 6 months before and for 6 months after. Because number one, it's going to take me 6 months to prepare to go to market and get the deal done. And number two, afterwards, I want to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and we're actually, going to be making the payments or making the projections that we said we were going to make. He said, the one thing I want to do, my most valuable thing is these are great resources for capital, and I don't want to mess up my reputation by doing a bad deal with them. So he said, every deal I do, he custom interviews people, And I guess he's got that luxury since he's a source of capital. And he charges them like a monthly retainer, and he charges them a fee for the percentage of the capital. And he's doing well enough to live up in New York City. So, but there's other niches, that are like a part of a CFO role that are, that people are doing. Some of the newer breeds, and maybe they're not as new, but they're more around now than they were. I call it a CFO consultant. It's really it's a kind of a business model that they tend to be virtual. They tend to work with smaller companies that use QuickBooks or Xero. They will have some kind of a middleware or something. They'll bring in all the data every month from your financials. They will put it in a format that's maybe standardized for them, and they will create a nice KPI dashboard. And then they will schedule a 1 hour per month CFO meeting. And so the owner of the company, leaders of the company will have this 1 hour per month CFO meeting, and they will review the financials. They will review the KPIs. The CFO will explain that all to them. The CFO may work with them on creating like cash flow projections, things like that from the financials, and they will review that with them. But there's a limit. They're not going to be in the business. They're going to be consulting to the business. That's I think the difference versus the part-time CFO. The other thing is too, you're going to get a very limited amount of time from them. They typically will have anywhere from 10 to 15 clients at a time, whereas I might only have 3 to 5 because mine are bigger. But fifth one, CPA firms. You're starting to see more and more CPA firms hiring a CFO advisor. Frankly, in the early days, my best source of leads was CPA firms. They were clearly in the position where they could see if someone needed a CFO or a part-time CFO, and if there wasn't one. And they would give really good referrals, and that was great. But nowadays, they're realizing, some of them, I mean, not the real small ones, but some mid-sized to larger, are hiring a CFO, a fractional CFO on their staff. And so all those internal referrals are staying internal. But they're starting to be a few more fractional CFOs in the CPA firms. Still not a floodgate, but there are more than there were 5 years ago. And then the last category I have is what I call the bookkeeping firm CFO advisor. And that's the one that kind of bothers me a little bit, that they call themselves fractional CFOs, because they really, very few of them have any kind of CFO experience. But they've been doing the books for small businesses, typically $1 million and less. And they've been doing the books all along, and there are a lot of consultants or coaches or programs on social media that are telling these bookkeeping firms, hey, you can upsell your clients and make more money. And you should get into this CFO advisory service stuff. And so there's a lot of bookkeeping firms around the country that are buying into this and saying, hey, I will offer that. I can do that because we've got the data. And all we need to do after we meet with one of these coaches or whatever, they give them a template, and they can do the cash flow projections output from QuickBooks into one of these templates, and then they can talk to these small businesses about that. The reason I'm not really negative about them at all, though, is that they are servicing the smallest of the small businesses, and we just, I can't afford to charge them. They can't afford to pay what I would charge them to help them. And I really don't have, it's really not a full, they don't really need a full CFO, frankly. And, it's just not a good match. So they're really, that's definitely popping up more and more. I've seen an awful lot of social media coaches and programs that are trying to approach those bookkeeping firms.
You mentioned size. I mean, what size, and this may be on a later slide, but what size client do you find is typically at the low end of the high end of what you like to work with?
It's not in a later slide, but I would say that it depends on if they're like a family-run business or something. If it's a slow growth business, I would say minimum 3 to 5 million for what I do if I'm going to go in on a regular basis and try and provide value for what I can do. I'd say minimum 3 to 5 million for a slow growth. If it could be a startup though, it could be pre-revenue. If it's pre-revenue, definitely we can add value. We've got one of our partners went in with a start-off spin-off from an incubator from a local university, and that was they got some kind of EV battery new technology thing. They just finished raising Series B, so he took them through Series A and Series B financing, and he was actually, it's pre-revenue, and he's working 3 days a week over there. So to me, it's more just a preference. I'm really adding my most value. I've got $30 to $50 million revenue companies I'm working with, and that's where I can really add the most value as a CFO, I think. So somewhere, I don't know, what does Focus CFO do? Since you asked the question, I'll ask you back.
I mean, we're similar. I mean, we catch the people at the low end. It might be 2 or 3 or 4 million when we start, and we've worked with people that were way, hard to believe there's 100, $200 million companies that don't have CFOs, but there are.
Yeah.
But the bell curve, the ones in the middle are probably 5 to 20 million, 5 to 30 million, kind of in there, in the day a week model.
Yeah, I would say, what we tend to do in the say $3 to $5 million range is we would start off at a day a week just to get them up and going and get some best practices in and make sure everyone's on the same page. And then maybe after 6 months or a year, we would scale back to a half day week.
Similar. Yeah.
Again, it depends on how fast it's growing. If it's just a lifestyle business and the owner's, taking all the money out at the end of the year kind of thing, you don't necessarily need a great, a full day a week, in my opinion, at that size. I don't know. Are you guys still do you find yourself doing that sometimes, scaling back?
Yeah, we do. I think there's an inflection point with businesses where they have to really decide if the owner's willing to change the organization,
right,
and make it scalable, which is what leads to creating value. And sometime in that 6 to 12 month, they either, if they're going to go that way, then we would continue at our normal billing and maybe even up it a little bit. But if not, we're certainly always want to make it affordable for them and meaningful. So we would cut it back.
Yeah, if I cut back, I always use that as the opportunity to increase my price, by the way. I don't like increasing prices for an existing client on a regular basis. So I do it when there's a change in my scope, and I do it also for new clients. So
we often will give them, just on that point, we actually, sometimes when we start, if it's a day a week client, we'll give them 2 prices. We'll give them the full day price and also give them the half day. And the half day might be 60 or 65% of the full day.
Yeah.
So, because you don't really just want to cut that. You don't want to make it too easy. for them and hard for you.
Right.
Oh.
Right.
I want to jump in. You mentioned startups, and I'm sort of a startup junkie. I just want to warn everybody, the your guy is working with a startup that has some money. That
Yes.
make sure you don't, unless you really love the business and want to take it over, don't work for equity. Make sure you get paid up front. That's just my advice on that.
You've been burned, huh?
Oh, I love it, but I can only do that. I actually set aside a portion of my week every week to work on a startup, but it's a startup I own. It's not a startup for somebody else. So that's how I get my startup fix.
There you go. That's I agree though. Startups are really tough to price because they've got a limited amount of money, and really the best part about a startup is that they need capital. So they need you, and you are the interface to bringing in more money. So they need to pay you at least a monthly retainer. And those are the situations I see that we can earn a fee on the on raising the capital, like a success fee. All right. Any other questions on these models? Anyone is there anyone on here that's in any of these bottom three models? 4, 5, or 6? Okay, there's wow. Okay.
I will comment, Tom. I used to be really upset that accountants and bookkeepers thought they were CFOs, but I think the way you put it, they're serving clients that can't afford you, and they're getting some kind of structure and some kind of financial advice, which is much better than nothing. So
correct. And in fact, them calling themselves fractional CFOs, maybe we ought to look at changing our name to something else.
yeah, there you go.
So, all right, go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's my crystal ball vision to the future. Is how do we get to 50,000? How are we going to get there? And I would say that the first thing is continued growth of firms like Focus CFO. Focus CFO is out there. Gosh, what are you up to now, Brad?
Marcus, do you know the answer to that? How many CFOs and how many area presidents?
176.
176.
CFOs.
Correct.
And then probably 40 area presidents that are developers.
And you've doubled in 2 or 3 years, right?
Ever since we hired Marcus, brought Sam and Glennis.
Sure, Jonathan Sam that's on here also.
Right. Oh, Lavert asked, can you repeat that stat for companies without a CFO? That is about 1.5%. It's actually in my book. I can, I don't know if I'll post it on my, if you guys want to follow, look at my LinkedIn profile, I'll post it later this week, that specific stat. I'll do a LinkedIn post. So, but Focus CFO isn't the only one. I saw this firm, Seton Hill down in Texas. I think I counted, they don't put out their stats. They don't brag about themselves very much. But I counted up their press releases for last year, and they had like 28 new CFOs they announced last year. And that's starting from Texas, but their footprint is around the country. Not sure, I don't know much about them, but they are growing. There's firms all over the place. CFO Systems, I think they're Kansas City. They're growing. I just got an invitation today for their virtual 20th anniversary celebration. So they've been around quite a while as well. And they've got a bunch of them. There are so many that are growing. Let's see, Amplio's big. They're growing. B2B CFO is out there. They're big.
Now CFO is a big firm.
Now CFO. I mean, all the traditional ones, I guess, are still growing, still adding. I mean, the good news is the market's still growing. Everyone that's made it to this level of success has figured it out, what you have to do to tap the market. And the market is ready. So it's just a matter of getting enough bodies in there to take advantage of that market. So I see continued growth. I'm sure Focus CFO does.
Well, the other, Tom, if I could just, the other thing that's interesting is you go back before COVID, and I mean, we were lucky if in a year we had 3 people come to our website and request information, businesses, and today we get over 100, maybe even more than that, businesses that come to our website inquiring about the services. So there is visibility out there. There are people that are getting up, business owners getting up and saying, what's this CFO? Is this something I need? And that just never happened before.
Right. Yeah. I think, we're past that. We're not having to explain ourselves as much anymore. The second thing is, though, around the world and of fractional CFOs. So I got a phone call a couple weeks ago from a guy. Well, actually, we did a Zoom call from Lebanon, Beirut, Lebanon. And if I can interject something interesting, I said, so how in the heck can you run a fractional CFO business in Beirut, Lebanon? And he said, well, I need to tell you that the southern part of Lebanon is run by Hezbollah, and that is a train wreck of an economy. But he said the northern part is run by the Christians, and we're just like any other European city. And in fact, we are a hub for a lot of the Middle Eastern countries in certain kind of white collar areas. So he said he's got contacts in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and he says he sees that there's a huge need there in the Middle East for fractional CFOs, and he said no one's doing it. And so he's an interesting character. He came from investment banking and PE background, and he grew up there, so he knows the lay of the land. He's worked in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, and so I'm particularly excited by what he's going to do, because he's also going in with the idea that he's going to grow it into a firm, not just do it for himself. Yeah. I talked to someone a week or two ago from Vietnam. It's like, she says, there's not Vietnam now. I mean, there's nothing really here in Vietnam for fractional CFOs. It's not a thing, but it should be. She said, we got a lot of companies that could benefit from it. And she was talking about, looking at her company that she worked for was based in Hong Kong. And I said, well, what about Hong Kong? Is that an area that they might be? She said, nope, they're just not into it. There's not really any penetration for fractional CFOs. India, there's an awful lot of people out in India that are contacting me and wanting to know how to get started, but there's not much going on there already. So it's going to be like we were back 20 years ago. They're where we were 20 years ago. So they're going to have to kind of, work their way into it. Europe's a little more penetrated. There's a firm that started in the UK called CFO Center, and they are actually in the United States and Canada, and I mean I think they're probably the biggest worldwide in terms of number of CFOs. They're in a number of continents. I talked to people in Australia. That's actually growing pretty nicely. There's a handful of fractional CFO firms down there, but a lot of them focus on virtual CFO. The people in India, the ones that are doing it already, they probably have a lot of opportunity in India, but the ones that are doing it right now are trying to do it in the United States. or UK or Europe. And they're struggling a little bit. They got a price advantage, but they don't have the ability to penetrate the and market
Hey,
there.
Tom, Mark Piper's got a question. Mark, you want to
Okay.
go ahead?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So it's a little bit interesting. And maybe some of you can share your thoughts about this. It's almost like there's these CFO firms. It's like going to work for a firm, for a professional services firm. Many of these CFO firms, they're hiring individuals like me on this phone call who could be a mid-market CFO, but instead come to our firm. Is it like a franchise model where it's like, well, you're going to have this market and go grow it, or they have the business and it's a lot like joining a staffing firm? Trying to get my head wrapped around this because I didn't know until the last few days, really, in this phone call, how many firms were out there in the US kind of doing this.
Mark, I think the answer is there's all of them. Everything that you mentioned, there's all the firms do it differently. And, some run an employee model and some run a 1099 model and some run a model where you have to go and you have to find the work and you do it yourself. Other firms like ours have business developers, which tend to be like seasoned, entrepreneurs out in the market that have credibility looking, and then the CFOs are doing. So I think it really depends on who you're looking at, but depending on what you're looking for, there's probably an offering out there if you want to be part of a group. And I'd be happy to, or Tom, I'm sure be happy to talk to you offline about maybe what you're looking for. And
yeah, and I'll also put in a shameless plug that if you go to my website, cfo2fractional.com, you can download, I put together about a 12-page guidebook that lays out all the differences between the different firms that you could join and shows how they're different. I don't go into each one individually, but I tell you what are the generic kinds of differences you'll find among them. So that's a free download if you want.
Yeah, Tom, Brad, appreciate that. Probably will do that. I'm just sort of here for informational learning. I never realized how big this world's getting. It's quite interesting. So
yeah,
taking a look at it for the first time, didn't really think about it. So thanks.
Yeah. So the growth of virtual CFOs. I mean, they're, as you probably have seen throughout, throughout all your customers, your clients, there are a lot of people out there that just, when they went home for COVID and started working from home, they never wanted to go back to the old way. And there's still a ton of people like that. A lot of the younger CFOs, I really think it's a demographic thing, an age thing. A lot of the younger CFOs are the ones most wanting to be the virtual CFO. The old curmudgeons like myself, we're used to it. I'd prefer to go in to a client. But at any rate, that's of course, Sean's raising his hand from down in Costa Rica, obviously, virtual.
And it's really far to raise it. Thank you, Tom, for the whole presentation and everything. What would you say are been your top lessons when it comes to scaling, going beyond just kind of one person, maybe two people to that? What have you learned that oh yeah, don't repeat this mistake, or you got to do this, that kind of thing?
Yeah, scaling is a leap of faith. It is, do you bring someone on board before you get additional business, or do you wait until you get the additional business and kill yourself trying to service the clients before you bring someone on? The ideal way to start, when you're just one person going to two or three, is if you could bring someone on basically on the basis of they earn what they kill kind of thing, as you get. So that's what we've done actually at Next Gen CFO. Everyone we brought on comes on without any business and without any pay. They are literally on their own. But we kind of put all our resources to helping them fill themselves up. And usually it's 3 to 6 months and they fill themselves up. But, you know, there's a lot of different ways of scaling. Obviously, Brad's at a different level with focus, you know, with people on staff. You know, there's a difference between going from 1 to 2 or 3, or from, you know, 3 to 5 and going up to 10. But either way, it's a little bit of a leap of faith. And the key is, if you're going to scale, you've got to have your marketing down. You got to have your business development down, because you don't want to add new bodies or expenses without knowing that you got more clients coming in.
And so does that mean you're doing like a 1099 for everybody, or is it still W-2, but just like you're part of the team, but you don't get any hours until you're actually delivering?
Yeah, my firm is one of many business models, but our firm
Right.
actually is, we've got 19 people and 19 different companies under a brand umbrella. We're a little different. We kick in $100 a month each for expenses, but we keep 100% of what we bring in. And so we bill ourselves, we bill our own clients, we collect from our own clients. We really, you know, don't have anything that someone has to share in. I mean, the $100 a month covers all our common expenses. And so the good thing about that is that we get to keep all of what we bring in. The downside, of course, is that we're limited in our ability to grow because we don't have an infrastructure, we don't have an office, we don't have, you know, people on the inside to onboard new people. You know, we're basically volunteering, paying it forward to the next person that comes along. And it's
Wow, so you're not like taking a cut. Basically, you're just kind of giving people some extra tools to make it easier for them to become fractionals, and a little bit of shared branding, that kind of thing. But otherwise, they're truly independent.
Yes. With the, I'll just comment that that's how we started and that's how we've maintained. And we do a referral fee, 10%. So if you know, we've got a new person that's trying to fill up, and I've got you know, I get a lead, and I pass him the lead and he gets the business, I'm gonna collect 10% from him for that referral, but that's it. Other than that. And so
Wow,
people come up to speed and learn. We also teach them how to go out in business development and market. We have a lot of good marketing efforts throughout the year with like banks and CPAs. They just opened a new Topgolf in Greensboro, and so we're going to be partnering and doing an event amongst ourselves with CPA firm. There's a local CPA firm and an insurance agency and a bank, and and us, Next Gen CFO. The 4 of us are going to kind of just all get together for a big party at Topgolf. And, you know, to me, that's just invaluable to network with people who are great referral sources. And
wow, that's a really neat model, Tom. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's a model that's not common also. So I will tell you that usually, you know, we just started off small and we wanted to protect our own personal books of business, and yet we wanted to leverage the bigger company. But if you're going to put yourself out there and you're going to take the risk, you're going to want some reward for that. You're going to want some ownership. So, you know, and actually we're struggling now with dealing with people that as they retire, you know, if they were in a CPA firm, they'd have an equity stake and they'd be bought out, right, as they were leaving, or some firm. But from us, we just walk off with nothing. You know, we kept 100% all along the way, but we've got no ownership stake. So anyway, but that's, you know, that's how we did it, and we've grown. So
Cool.
Good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions anyone sees? Any hands up? before I go on. The number four, that I think that growth of the CFO services is really what's going to help us get to the 50,000, because I think there's a huge amount of these $1 million and less, 5-person businesses that they could just use that tiny bit of a CFO service. And so I think these bookkeeping firms are going to continue to gain a lot more clients than we are, obviously at a lot lower price and a lot less time involved. And I think that's going to continue growing as well. And I really think, I don't know when the 5 years started, but if say it started last year, I think 4 years from now, I think that could be, maybe we only end up with 25,000, but it's still going to be a lot more than now. And there will be a lot more companies that will benefit from what we can do. So any other comments or questions on this slide? Oh, there we go.
Bunch of hands.
Okay. I'm looking at Daniel. Let's start with Daniel.
Hey, thanks for your presentation so far, Tom. I am definitely sitting in item 3. I'm based in Bali at the moment. I'm a 12-hour time difference, so it's pretty early for me.
Oh.
But I'm interested in your take. I've worked in the world of public accounting, done some industry work in sort of VP of Finance, CFO roles. So moved to that sort of fractional model. I'm interested in your thoughts on the scope, because I see myself more as a small business CFO. I don't have, I would never position myself as, a listed company kind of CFO, which a few people I've talked to that do. But I feel like at the level I'm at, you're more than just the CFO. You don't have the resources to tap into like you would in a bigger firm and a traditional CFO of someone to do some of the modeling and that kind of thing. The ones I work with have bookkeepers, and they're usually those bookkeeping services that are based overseas and pretty low price. And that's obviously creates an opportunity for the fractional CFO model, because they don't really provide that, though, as you say, they might move into it.
Right. So the question is scope. How do you keep within a reasonable scope, I guess, right?
It's about, is there, I'm interested in the sort of the models for scope, because I'm doing all, anything above bookkeeper is kind of what I'm doing. So it's kind of a CFO, but plus model, because I'm
Right.
doing a lot of the other stuff as well.
So the scope, and that's kind of what I do, is there anything, well, and with the, bigger small businesses, anything above a controller. So I'll have controllers reporting to me. And the way I keep within scope is I designate a certain amount of time per week for them. And if there's scope creep within that, and I can't get everything done, I sit down with the owner of the company and say, listen, we need to prioritize what's coming to me. What do you want to do first? What do you want to do second? What do you want to do third? Because I've got my 1 day a week that I'm there, but it's more than what I can do. And sometimes they'll say, well, you know what, let's just, for the next 3 months, we'll move you up to 2 days a week and pay you for 2 days a week. And so sometimes that happens, but usually we prioritize within the time that's available. If you're in a situation like what you described. So
that makes sense. And in terms of if they need like a projection or something like that, you're doing it yourself as well?
Usually what I'll do, like I said, I've got a controller or accounting manager or someone reporting to me. And so I will do it, and I will do it for the first while. And then assuming they're a competent controller or accounting manager, I will kind of pass the baton to them and let them train them on how to do it and let them start doing it. But I'll usually do that in the initial stages. I think, Brad and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do an awful lot of FP&A work as a fractional CFO. The businesses that we're in, are not big enough to have a full-time FP&A person. We're just not. So, or they're not. Would you agree, Brad and Mark?
Yeah, the comment I'll make is we, and a lot of people use this, we just use the analogy about the driving the car, and the rear view mirror is the accounting function, and the GPS is the forward looking function. A lot of businesses, they've got a rear view mirror function, but what they really need is the FP&A that comes out of that GPS, and getting inside the business owner's head and trying to figure out what they want to do, and you model it and show them what the business would look like if they do it. And sometimes they don't like that. So now it's just a matter of readjusting their expectations. So Mark, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I want to jump in because for me, if even sometimes some of the businesses I work with aren't even big enough to have a real control. And I don't want to do all the financial analysis. So I actually have a subcontractor that works for me that does a lot of my modeling. I do the analysis, but I don't sit there and get the data. I have a format, he gets it in there, he's happy, he's retired. I pay him more than than it's worth, but I know he's going to do a great job. Pay him $100 an hour, but he's happy and I'm happy, and I don't get myself bogged down in those details, so I can stay focused on the budgeting and the strategy and things like that. So.
Yeah, and you wrap that up in your fee, Mark?
Excuse me?
That's included in your fees, is
it'll be
this person in the background?
I'll build that out at like 150 an hour.
Oh, great. Okay, so you're charging that on top.
Yeah, and if they don't like that, then they can get somebody internal to do it, right? But it's worth it. He's faster. He's 10 times faster than I am, actually, as far as putting models together anyway. So it's very efficient.
Yep.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yes, Brad, sorry, Tom, thanks so much for your presentation. Just a question, considering all these different models you've mentioned and where it's all going, as a matter of interest, if you were starting out, which model do you think you would consider for going forward?
Oh, no one's asked me that question. I think I would probably start off as doing what I'm doing now, which is as a part-time CFO, but I would have started with the intention of creating a firm, kind of like what Focus CFO is doing, and I would have laid the foundation for that in the early days. I'm sitting here now, seeing retirement up on the horizon and thinking, it would have been nice back when if I had an equity stake in something that's now got some value. The other thing is there's private equity groups that are out there that are wanting to buy and roll up fractional CFO firms, and accounting firms, definitely fractional CFO firms, and they're offering the kind of stupid money PE groups can do, considering that if they brought someone on, all you got to keep all the people, because if you lose all your CFOs, then the customers are going to go away as well. So it would have been nice to have a nice payday as I got near retirement, one way or the other. And so that's when I started out, I probably should have done something like that, but I didn't. And but I like the part-time. I liked being a CFO, frankly. It was something I enjoyed doing, something I was good at. Through my last job, I was 14 years, and I did pretty much everything a CFO could possibly do with just one company as we grew. And that's really been helpful, because in any given situation, I can go in and make an impact. And I like adding value, but it's harder to add value. I've definitely struggled with the smaller businesses because it's been hard to find value to add. And it's been, I'm not as good at it, frankly, getting bogged down in the trenches, like Mark was talking about, trying to stay, outsource certain things. I'm really good at spreadsheets, but I'm not good at trying to reconcile QuickBooks accounts. So there's a fine line there, but I kind of like what I'm doing. I kind of like, that model. So,
And
just a quick, Richard,
Yeah.
go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'll just shoot you a comment.
sorry, Brad. Yeah, Tom, just on your comment about private equity firms being interested in fractional CFO firms, you were also saying CPA firms. Can you just clarify what you were saying there, please?
oh gosh, I can't remember which one of the big four, I think, or maybe 5 or 6 just sold out to a PE firm. I don't remember what it was, but
Grant Thornton.
who is it?
Grant Thornton got acquired by a PE firm recently.
Yeah, Grant Thornton just got acquired by a PE firm. So they're somehow figuring out that they can do it better. And, by Jove, they've got a pretty good track record of making money off of their investments. So I think I read an article somewhere back a few months ago that talked about that. They're still out there looking for more. So.
A lot of the CPA firms that what I've heard is that they're a PE firm will buy a lot of times they're buying the non-assurance part of the CPA firm. So they're buying the tax and the consulting, and then they're trying to buy other specialty consulting services like Fractional CFO to take that $7,000 a year tax client and upsell,
Right.
$80,000 of fractional CFO work to them.
Right. So fortunately, I think it's just inevitable. One of those bigger national firms is going to sell out to a PE group. But fortunately, I think most of them are sticking to their guns, because it's still a growth environment.
Richard, I'll also say, Tom mentioned about, focus CFO and the scalability. Look, I was 40 when I started. I'm 63 now. I was a really good CFO in my career. I've actually never done client work. And so it's, my experience is to build a scalable firm, you have to get up every day and be the person that's trying to get clients. And so that's the thing that, we all have to figure out. It's like, do you want to get the work? Do you want to do the work? And there are really successful CFOs who have turned into business development people who have built $2, $3, $4 million firms. And so they're not going in and doing the work, but a lot of people that are CFOs, they love doing the work. And so that's just it's really up to each individual to decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. But I've not seen too many folks that have gone in and said, I'm going to work 2 or 3 days worth of client work, and then I'm going to try to build a scalable firm, because it's hard to bring resources in and then get them busy if you don't have a business development function. And there are exceptions to that for sure, but
yeah.
But
thanks very much.
Tom, we got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah,
so
all right. I guess I would just say for the future, there'll be a shakeout in some of these business models. I think there's just so many, it's almost like a shotgun approach. There's FP&A consulting firms, or, I get people, I had a guy call me, he's a FP&A guy, and he said, I want to start a fractional CFO firm. I want to scale it to $1 million in a year. And he's like in his 30s. And so there's a lot of people out there throwing things at the wall, and some of them are working and some of them aren't. But so I think there'll be some sort of a shakeout along as we grow. The second part, though, and this is to that point of the FP&A guys, there are some good CFO online education, type of programs. So like a 6-month boot camp or 6-month, learning experience to kind of take someone who's a controller wanting to be a CFO and kind of give them the skill set and the knowledge to be able to do that. And so there's a couple that I'm familiar with. Grow CFO has, I think, an emerging CFO program at 6 months, and they do it in cohorts, and that's really good. So I think these FP&A and controller guys that want to be a fractional CFO, that's my first recommendation. They say, what do I need to do that? I said, well, first thing you need to do is understand what it is to be a CFO. And so there's some educational opportunities out there online. And then the third, this is my really last point, is that AI is a big unknown, but I think it's coming. Well, I know it's coming. And it's amazing what it's done in the last year and a half. And we just need to stay on top of it. I'm not a bleeding edge kind of person. I'm kind of not, and I'm not late to the game either, but I want to stay kind of on top of things. And so I'm continuing to monitor that. And as I get an opportunity to put something into one of my clients, which is, ideal because, I don't have to experiment with it on my own. That's what I'm doing. So, and that's last point here, in my opinion, that the CFO is going to be the last person standing, because when you've got AI running your business, and 30 to 50 years from now, are you going to need anyone to do anything? I don't know. I mean, exponentially, is the software going to do it all? And it might. But I think you're still going to need a human brain in the middle of it. And I think the CFO is going to be that human brain. So I think that if you're, not at the CFO level yet, getting to that, and also the fractional CFO, because that if the AI software is doing everything or doing lots of things, you maybe don't need, that $500 million company might only need a part-time CFO. So anyway, that's my last thing. The next slide is actually just questions in case no one had any questions. But so I don't know if there's one on there you guys want to pick out, or are we out of time? Pretty much, yeah, pretty much out of time.
We should wrap up now. I think there were a lot of
Yeah.
really good questions.
Okay. Yeah. So just to tell you that I am doing coaching now for would-be prospective fractional CFOs. My two main programs are the CFOs who are kind of wanting to get out of their current position, and they're really intrigued by a fractional CFO deal. And so I have a smaller session to coach them on what it's like to be a fractional CFO and help them decide whether that's the career for them. I have another one which is geared toward people who have a little bit more of a runway, maybe 3 to 6 months before they're going to leave their current job, but they're determined they're going to be a fractional CFO, and I can help them lay that foundation so that they launch well. And so that's my website, CFO to Fractional. Pretty good term to describe what it's about. And the free resources on there, which is the download of the guidebook for helping you determine between different firms and what are their various offerings out there. There's my LinkedIn link, and there's my book. I couldn't get it to work. I couldn't get a good hyperlink to put on there. So, but if you go into Amazon and type in fractional CFO on the search bar, it should be the first or second book that shows up.
Great. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you. A couple of things before we wrap up here in about 3 minutes. Really appreciate everything you shared with us, Tom. It was fantastic. Couple of things that I want to maybe close up with, and I'll give Brad a few seconds as well. One, if you are looking for a firm, you should absolutely look at Focus CFO. It's probably the premier firm in the country. I really think a tremendous amount about them. And then the other thing is, like Tom, Brendan, who's on this call, and I have a course called Freeway to Fractional. And we do very much the same thing that Tom does. We believe that there's no shortage of people to talk to. So it's all good. Same as with CFO services. And if your email is in this, we'll be sending you some information, right, Brendan?
Absolutely. I keep muting because my dog is going crazy because of the delivery driver.
Yes.
Oh, good. But we also have some free resources that'll be available, and it'll be great. And then remember, you're not, even if you're on business by yourself, you're not really by yourself, because you're going to be part of the FANG SBMOs. Brad does one that's more tied to, I'm sorry, Matt Budd does one more tied to sort of the nuts and bolts of setting up legal and whatnot. And it's a great conversation every month. And then Brad and I and our support team are doing this every month. And we really look forward to that. And please invite your friends. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Brad, anything to say in closing?
Just appreciate everybody being here, and thanks for everybody's interest in the fractional CFO world. I think there's just great people in it, and you're going to find that people are very supportive of each other as we all just kind of work together to have everyone be successful. So feel free to reach out to Tom, Mark, myself, all happy to help. So
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks. See you. Bye. Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.